And many styles like natural alcohol phenos instead of fortified phenos. Palomino is a great variety. Vino de Pasto that we're having the first of two of right now. It was a region that just lost its confidence and drive for 50 years, and a bunch of really great young women and men are bringing it all back in a hurry right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. And first of all, because of the way the industry was going, and then call it confident. I think it's a good way to put it. I think that people got a bit of lack of confidence to show off and to really show to the world what is going on in there. And it's really curious how these guys are doing it right now. I love it. It's El Muelle is the name of the wine. Obviously, Vino de Pasto, which is a term that is being used very much. Luis Perez, the producer, 2019 vintage. But then we have Vino de la Tierra de Cádiz, which is the bigger DO, denomination of origin, as it is not a fortified wine. It cannot be called sherry or Vino de Jerez. And then we have Tosca de Barajuelas, which is what really is calling my attention from these producers, which is the soil type, and then Carrascal, which is the Pago, which is the vineyard. So we are naming now in a sherry or in a wine coming from Jerez, the specific soil type and the specific single vineyard. And this is really cool. Raul, you know about Tosca de Barajuelas, no? You know about soil types in Jerez a bit, right?
Mm-hmm. So Tosca is one of the finest classification of the soil profile of Albariza. So what we gotta say, Albariza is a soil profile which does have the highest level of limestone in the world, much higher than Burgundy or Jura. So we find limestone, which is a unique soil profile because of it helps retain water, and it does help to have a much more steady ripening condition. That the Albariza soil profile, which is very similar to Champagne, but the difference is based on diatomeas. So it's some vegetal plankton that what is the base of limestone on these soils. And Tosca de Barajuela is like a lentil. It's almost like when you see a bullfighter that goes to the ring, and these little garnishments they do have, they're little lentils. So is that we call it lentejuela. Barajuela is a soil profile which is a bit many layers sitting on top of like a milfoil, and it's a soil profile which is more typical of inland pagos in the areas of Jerez, and is one of the finest to quality grapes. Carrascal, as you mentioned, is a vineyard. You could say Carrascal is a pago. A pago is like a district, and that district might have many vineyards within, but it's by far one of the finest in the sherry district. So I think this wine has got the best DNA to produce an still wine. It does have one of the three best soil profile for the region. It does come from one of the best DNA of the vineyard classification. And last but not least, it came from one of the greatest family of winemakers in the region.
And as Scott was touching base before and talking about the people lowering the yielding and just trying to get back to that quality production over quantity. I know that you, Raul, are a very humble person and you don't like to show off and you don't like to talk about, but I know that you're doing crazy viticulture methods in your vineyards, and
Mhm.
what are you doing now? Because sherry, unfortunately, it got to that commercial point where people didn't care about the vineyards
Mhm.
anymore, spraying, just doing, just worrying about the yielding and not about the quality anymore. But thanks to Luis Perez and to people like you, they
Mhm.
getting back to that kind of like taking care of the vineyard and having that kind of like vineyard on person who's really taking care of the piece of land. What
So I
are
think
what are you doing?
I think yeah, Scott pointed at it before. Is unfortunately cherries make on the sellers. As he pointed, they might buy some base juice from the local cooperative, and then they put it through the methodology of sherry system, well being by flow or by oxidation. Pointing at Willie is someone who have a very methodological approach to viticulture, and what they do is they constantly harvesting the vineyard during several weeks, even couple of months. So they drop in some fruit as well to lower the yields. They start picking fruit much earlier than anyone else to have a base of acidity to be mixed with the wines, with the grapes they're picking later. Some of the grapes they pick at the beginning, they might use for distillation, so everything becomes part of their own circle. So that distillation could be their base brandy or the base spirit to fortify their own wines. And then it's picking some of the most premium wines out of the best vineyards at the end. I think what is very sad for me uh, in the Marco is that the abuse of herbicides that is done into the vineyards. Obviously, my approach is different to Willie Perez and other guys because I focus a bit more into natural styles of wine. So using very little sulfur to no sulfur at all on the wines I do make. Um, but in terms of viticulture, yes, I got my own vineyard and I work with a few growers. But what I tend to do is I work with with cover crops and mixing different styles of. I work with biodiversity, intense, and I use very little to non-sulfur on the vineyard, and so I promote. Uh, I do sort of organic farming with some biodynamic approaches, but I tend to have biodiversity by having 8 different kinds of trees planted within the vineyard, cover crops, aromatic plants like absent plants, like coriander, like rosemary, like thyme, like lavender. That's gonna bring natural predators, and thankfully, the European Community approved last year in October the use of milk in vineyards. It's something I have worked with in South Africa and Australia. So I spray up till veration milk on the vineyards to deal with the fungal issues. So my approach, I'm based in San Luca. Most of the work I do. San Luca, it has a much more Burgundian approach, smaller plots, family vineyards have been split and passed generation after generation. When in Jerez, you have largest vineyards, a bit much more like Bordeaux. Not to say San Luca, there is amazing vineyards. I work with fruit
Mhm.
from Jerez too, from Puerto Santa Maria, Rota, Chipiona. But my approach is into viticulture. As Scott pointed, low yielding, spot on. I don't get more than 5 tons per hectare out of my, and sometimes I drop some fruit. And yes, I do work with all ancient varieties. I work as well with other uh, red varieties like Melonera Tinta as well, which is an Andalusian variety. And then my project of viticulture is with Portuguese varieties. So I have introduced in 3 different vineyards, 3 Portuguese varieties, and I have top grafted all Palomino vineyards with Arinto, which is a variety that retains very good acidity. with Encruzado, which is a variety which produces very powerful wines, and as well with Vaga, which is another variety. So these varieties that deal, under my opinion, very well with climate change and hydric stress, it will complement very well the local varieties. Adding to be my base of acidity, because I don't acidify my wines to acidify Palomino. And like Scott pointed, Primitivo Collantes rediscover or brought back the Uva Rey, which is a variety which is picked very late, have an amazing natural acidity. He used it to increase the acidity of his wines. And then Encruzado is a variety that will bring my approach to make some Burgundian style of wines as well. And Vaga is for my project I do have for sparkling wines, in which would be adding to Vaga and Palomino the sparkling wine I'm experimenting with at the moment.
I'm getting two clear ideas of what you were just saying. One is they want to put a monument of you in Portugal.
In my toilet.
But they but they want to kill you in the south of Spain. Is there people looking for you to kill you in the south of Spain?
To be honest, I did it very simple. At first, all the material I brought from Portugal, I brought it under certified nurseries of Portugal. So it's the procedure. All these three varieties, I've been the first person in Spain to register them. These Portuguese varieties, the one I registered officially in Spain. So they're registered under my name. And but then what the second step is to bring a massal selection of material coming from Portugal, which has been brought off, bio-certified too, but from other vineyards. So the first Vaga, Encruzado, and Arinto I brought from nurseries, and then the massal selection I brought them from vineyards in Portugal. But look, my wife is Brazilian. My kids in my house who speak Portuguese. I have worked in Douro, I have worked in Alentejo, I have worked in Vinho Verde. I have an amazing love affair with Portugal, and a firmer believer.
And it's Iberian Peninsula at the end.
Of the Iberian Peninsula. Yeah, why are we going to plant French varieties? Why are we going to grow French varieties when we can have Portuguese varieties? I agree. Portuguese are our cousins. We have a lot to do with it. And if I could, I wish that Portugal and Spain would become one country with several nations. So Spain will be a nation, Catalonia will be a nation, Portugal will be a nation, Galicia will be a nation. So that's the way I look at it, because we're enclosed on the same peninsula. So we need to.
I agree. And then what you were talking about viticulture, just to finish with this, it sounds beautiful. It sounds amazing, like what you're talking about. And especially especially what like the time that we're going today, like the green planet and being healthy, and no sprays and no blah 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 blah. In terms of, like, let's measure it in percentage, how much harder, how much more work do you need to do in the vineyards to get the results that you are getting right now, doing what you're doing? How much it costs you to be like 200, 300% more time in the vineyard?
But it is labor. So it's very simple. I have cover crops, as I mentioned, and I grow natural grasses, leguminaceas, and cruciferas. So you need to manage your cover crops. So I just use like a manual, sort of a power engine, sort of wheat cutter, and you need to, those cover crops, when you cut them, you make a mulch, and then I have some planted by me and some spontaneous one, and I have to manage. So because that is small plots, I do all the work myself. Occasionally, if I'm pruning and things like that, I have to get some local guys to assist me, but I try to do everything. And dealing with all the vineyards I deal with, they are maximum 1 hectare. So it's what you call here 2 aranzadas, which is almost like half an hectare. So they're small properties, You just go. Now it's easy, but from spring onwards and summer, you start very early in the morning. and then by 1, 2 p.m. when the sun is hitting, you finish for the day.
You have to.
And you have to, but you cannot. I mean, you cannot do this approach into larger vineyards because it will cost you too much money, increase too much the price of a wine. But if it's your time, what you're putting, and the small vineyards, you can do. But obviously, you need to factor your own time into it as well.
For sure. Alrighty, let's drink more wine, eh? Scott, what are we drinking next?
I think it's the Callejuela next, is it not?
Callejuela, eh? Who's Callejuela?
Show me the bottle. Let's see what we're drinking, everyone. Las Mercedes.
La Mercedes, eh? Beautiful packaging, eh? Isn't it? I'm in love lately with these like very simple white and black labels. I think they're really, really interesting. Very easy to read as well.
So if I were to pick something right now, and there are, I import maybe 15 or so different versions of this style of wine. This is exactly where I want Marco de Jerez to be mainly right now, which is, you know, $40 to $70 retail in Australia bottle of wine that is high quality Palomino grown in really good chalk with a tiny bit of ullage and a tiny bit of floor yeast, so a little bit of biological aging, but basically a perfect expression of a specific vineyard. And if you wanted to learn Marco de Jerez in 3 bottles, you would buy the 3 Vino de Pastos that these guys, Paco and Pepe Blanco, Los Hermanos Blancos, who are the brothers who make this bodega called Callejuela. They have one key Pago on the coast in San Lucar called Pago Callejuela. Halfway across to Jerez, they have a little vineyard in this Pago called Añina, and then all the way across in Jerez, they have another parcela called La Choza in Pago Machanudo. In those 3 bottles, you go from 3 hills. A Pago is just a landform. So Marco de Jerez is 111 different hills, and all of the chalk soil is the top half of all of the hills. And when you go from San Lucar inland, you go from cold, moist, delicate Atlantic breezes and almost rice bubble-like structured chalks called lentejuelas, so double delicate wind and delicate chalk. When you end up in Jerez inland, you've got strong barajuelas, laminated, iron-rich pressed chalks with hot inland breezes and quite powerful ones. And Añina, which we're drinking here, is literally just halfway in between. So it's Atlantic and continental, really relaxed, easy, long, languorous, just a perfect summation of, you know, if without challenging anybody too much, I wanted to say, what's Jerez about? I'd say, drink this bottle. This is a perfect expression of chalk, it's salty, and the bit that Raul mentioned before we haven't explained, lots of diatomaceous, old algal marine fossil material in the chalk. So you've got crunchy chalk soil, influenced by Atlantic salt, the wheaty cereal-like character that's inherent in Palomino, and then this amazing amount of old mineral fossil phytoplankton and algal deposits. So the highest part of the highest vineyards are the chalkiest, and they're incredibly rich with 30 million year old sea fossil information. It's just a dazzling complexity of things going on in a very unforced wine. All of these play out really easily. The first thing is there's just this lovely wheaty, cereally expression of high quality, low crop organic Palomino, and it's got chalk running through it, salt running through it, Atlantic minerals, marine mineral stuff running through it, a little bit of the orange blossom that the interaction of Palomino and chalk and the seabeds can give. Really dazzling, but also light and easy at the same time. Very unforced wine.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's I had a glass last night. I had a glass of this and yeah, I have to like. I'm very impressed. Very impressed with the quality of just it's hard for me to not be influenced by my roots, you know, and I think that this is something new even for all the Spanish people, you know, and for sherry lovers. This is what we're talking about here, like the new movement of taking that pride and talking about the terroir, talking about the grape variety, and taking Palomino and Jerez and the south of Spain to its best in terms of expression, and taking all of that away. Blind tasting for me as a sommelier, this is a great wine, one of the great wines of the world. And I think that for whatever it is, 40, 50, 60, $70 retail in Australia, this is a bargain. This is something that you cannot find anywhere in the world at the moment in terms of value for money. I don't know how.
Well, and as Scott mentioned before, it's a very strong link of connection with Burgundy. Like this has nothing to envy to an appellation, a richer style of Burgundy, like a Meursault. Like you got a structure, you got palate weight, you got aromatic, you got a seamless integration of oak, even in this case sherry bats. Like we speak about Palomino being a neutral variety, the fruit precision out of this wine, Mercedes de Callejuela, the stony fruity characters, they're unbelievable. And there is that sort of mixture of ethereal qualities, salinity, minerality, combined with fruit quality, combined with very gentle, subtle aromatics that make these wines world class.
It reminds me a bit to Meursault. I'm not honestly.
I mean, it's
the structure, the power, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's just how much is this retail in Australia, Scott?
$70.
$70. For $70, you cannot buy a bottle of Meursault or anything else. But
you can't buy a book.
The cork used 2 times. Can you run me quickly, Raul, about this wine? What do you get on the nose, texture-wise? Just a bit of a leave your feelings aside, please. Talk to me as a sommelier.
This is a perfect example of a Vino de Pasto. Even though that Moye fits within the same category, you can really identify the flaw on the nose. So it doesn't dominate because it's a short sort of aging underflow, but you can have that sort of yeasty sourdough kind of character, almost when you're making a pizza dough at home and it's racing. So you just get there, but it doesn't dominate like a Pheno Manzanilla could do. Is not leading the wine, but bring that sort of layer of complexity. Scott pointed very well, orange blossom, beautiful, gentle, flor d'azar that now in Seville, all the trees are blossoming. So we can smell this every day in Seville. some fruit characters, so much get a gentle sort of aniseedy, licoricey, but almost like the aniseedy that you could get on a barbaresco. Very, very, very gentle.
Mm-hmm.
And the palate, I think the minerality is crazy. For me,
It is, isn't it?
this wine, it feels like I have a glass of white wine and I have a glass of a very hard water, like Perrier, and I take a sip of the wine, I take a sip of Perrier, and mix it on my mouth, and all this salty mineral magnesium, calcium you get out of a hard water is on the wine. It's little particles of salinity in suspension on your mouth, interacting with your whole palate, not only on your tongue, on your gums, on your teeth, flipping around like if you're tumble drying on a dryer and you have that sort of salinity interaction.
I agree. It's not something like you say. All the flavors are well integrated. No, they're not integrated, but they're not all layers. They're not coming one after another. It's just they just playing around. They're just moving around and playing, and you just like feel it and over and over. It's
I think I really like the call from Scott about the wheaty cereal. Like you do have this sort of Milo cereal, wheaty cereal character. The salinity sometimes in this wine might remind you a bit of.
What do you mean? Sorry, what
the
do you mean
salinity
with
you can
that?
get
With the wheaty cereal? Do you mean like a sprouts? Like
So
a
you got
like...
sort of, I know you got like the flavor out of oats, out of grains, you
Uh-huh.
know, slightly dusty and powdery in there, and almost you got the salinity that you might have on a single malt whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
The one that has texture is not as voluptuous at El Muelle, or actually it's at voluptuous El Muelle, but has a much fresher acid structure with keeping balance, that sort of palate weight. So the palate weight is contained on a frame that oak is neither being too aggressive, neither too tight. So I think it's a very complex wine that touch every single layer of complexity you can find on a wine. It's a gastronomic wine. It's amazing to have it like this, but this will really come together serving it with food. It does have the possibility to go with raw shellfish, as we discussed, with really nutty sort of almond-based, macadamia-based sort of dishes, but have the palate weight, the structure, and the length to take more serious dishes, white meat, sort of guisos marineros, as we call in Cadiz, to stews made with very firm flesh fish. Amazing wine for cheese. I think for a hard cheese, for a cheese to have an affinage of a couple of years, and you have crystallization of salts, for a good Grana Padano, for a good Manchego, for a Tessun
It's
Albarolo,
just
for an
for
Echelle,
everything.
amazing.
It's for everything.
Amazing.
It just goes
Yeah.
with everything. And I was actually reading about a few a few um, a few comments about this wine and a few mentions of people talking about fish and chips. And I was like, fish
Why
and
not?
chips are great. And I was like thinking about it. If you think about it, okay, fish and chips is not perhaps the most complex dish in the world, but talking about flavors and structures, it's got the salty character, it got the crunchy, the fishy, the oily, the sauce. I mean, it's a bit going on. It's a lot going on in there. If you think about pairing with a wine and you need
But
something that is
remember as well that tempura and butter fry for fish is an Spanish invention. Okay, so the Spanish introduced it to the Brits in Gibraltar, who took it to the UK, and the Spaniards, missionaries who took the Catholicism to Japan, introduced it to the Japanese. So the tempura, what we call a pavia here, a butter fried fish, is an Spanish creation,
yeah.
and it makes no more sense.
You eat it.
Look at the
You eat it
look at
in every house in South Spain. Every grandmother makes it.
Yeah, and as Scott pointed before, this could go into cancer restaurant. You could have it with the most simple food, with the most simple ingredient, with nothing done into it, with a piece of tuna which is fancier and served with a drop of olive oil. Or you could have it in a really highly gastronomic restaurant in Australia, in Spain, or any country, they are the most amazing.
Yeah, everywhere. Yeah, I agree. And this is one of the things that makes me happy, because even though we are moving into this new world of sherry, of these new trends of producers, new styles of sherries, non-fortified, they still have the same character. They still have that talking about food pairing, they are still one of the most versatile wines in the world. And well, before we move to the old style again, and to another Pheno, before we leave this new style of Vino de Pasto, Scott, anything that you want to mention about this new trend, all new way of making wine?
Yeah, well, I actually, when I talk about this with everybody, I always go, we could lose sight of the main game and we could spend time talking about, production processes and fortification or aging or whatever. But in the 1 minute that a waiter or sommelier has to sell a bottle of wine on the restaurant floor, the 1 or 2 minutes that you spend if you're a retailer standing next to a shelf and trying to put a bottle of wine in somebody's hand, gastronomy has to be what's important. What does it taste like? What will I use it for? Not all of this back of house production stuff. That comes after. If somebody wants to be, nerdy about production processes or whatever, which is one of the reasons why Cayahuela is a really interesting place to start, because they, in these wines, in their Vino de Pasto, they cover the 3 basic food groups that you're going to have of wines that have exactly the same characteristics. Cereal, whether it's rice, wheat, or barley, or with aging, if it's gone to oat cake or beer broth or whatever, but cereal, chalk, salt, the other aspects of the soil, and then something about aging, a little bit of flora, a little bit of semi-oxidative, whatever, which is the local style. But when you look at these guys, you go, so they explain Jerez in 3 simple steps: pure Atlantic, pure Jerez inland, so the Poniente winds and delicate chalks, and the Levante winds and strongly structured chalks, and a midpoint in between, which is actually fairly contested about whether vineyards belong in Jerez, San Lucar, or Puerto. But you get 3 basic types of wine: nervous vertical wines by the coast in delicate chalk, halfway in between relaxed horizontal easy wines, and then across towards Jerez, deep driving powerful ones. They're all beautiful. They are all the same more or less, but when you want them for a gastronomic purpose, there's 3 really quite specific faces that a lovely Palomino wine can have. And I don't care whether that's a Palomino in stainless, a Vino de Pasto, which is just a term for a wine with some aging, or a Pheno as such. You've got all of these basic characters of the land, the sea, the chalk, the salt, and Palomino's characters, and the possibility of being that, or that. And there's just a world of gastronomic possibility there. And if we just go, just concentrate on those flavors and textures and directions and things, it's as exciting as white wine gets on the planet, full stop. In my very
that's a big call.
No, it is true. And look at the persistence of the ones on the palate. You drink Las Mercedes, is the French call it, in France they call it Caudalis, the persistence of flavor in your palate. They're almost endless, like you drink it with very good material out of very low yields. The flavor persistence is, you could smoke a cigarette and you can taste it afterwards, like
You
many
wake
months
up,
in the
you
world.
wake up, you wake up the next day, yeah?
Yeah.
And then they do
You wake up the
this.
next.
That
So
stuff is amazing.
What's that? What's that?
So this is maybe a little secret. So Paco and Pepe also do this. In each of these three pagos, where they make a vino de pasto, the vertical, horizontal, deep driving thing I was talking about, they also make from exactly the same parcel a vintage single vineyard manzanilla. So there's no Solera blending, no anything. It's just statically aged, big sister version of this. So effectively a Grand Cru single vineyard within a really, really lovely Pago Añina, done two ways as a lightly handled vino de pasto and a more made manzanilla, which is still just a pure terroir or Pago expression. So you can actually do an amazing tasting, which is 6 bottles, 2 coastal San Lucar wines, a vino de pasto and a manzanilla from Hacienda Doña Francisca in Pago Cañuelas, the 2 versions of Las Mercedes in Añeda, and the 2 versions of a little vineyard called La Choza that they have in Machanudo. I just wanted to.
What are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me, Scott? Is that available in Australia on retail?
Si no puedo follar con tu cabeza, ¿qué es el punto? Yeah. I bring them both in. It's time we sat down and did a tasting together. Anyway, I just wanted to chuck in one point, bringing back what Raul was saying ages ago about the antiquity of vineyard specificity here compared to anywhere else. Make sure that you know that of the 111 pagos, some of them are named in Castellano, like Cayajuela, Little Street. Some of them are in Old Roman, and some of them, like Machanudo, possibly the greatest of all of them, are in Moorish. So this 3,000 years of deep viticultural history is reflected linguistically in the names of the pagos in 3 different invading cultures who've been the primary agricultural force in.
And they all kept making wine. And they all kept doing the right things, even the Muslim, that they were not drinking wine. Well, I mean, I don't know.
Who can say? But certainly they licensed spirit for its preservative value.
Definitely.
That's for sure, and that's a tradition, and that's something that it's hard to believe that it's one of the longest winemaking regions producing wines like non-stop, and it's hard to believe that it was left out or left to the side for such a long time, and thanks God, trends or whatever you want to call it come and goes, and now we are back into it, and I think it's great retailers, great importers like Scott, great vignerons, great viticulturists and producers like Raul, and great sommeliers as well that are giving it to people to try and to rediscover even the old style or the traditional style and the new style thriving again. All right, should we try the last of the wines?
Yes, master.
Guys, I have to admit something. I had a glass of this, and I work as a sommelier. I I don't drink much wine, but I taste a lot. Burgundy, Bordeaux, like you name it. Um, just because of my work, and no many wines makes me have a goosebumps. And last night I had it with this wine. Honestly, like I had one of those moments. I had a moment, you know. I had one of those feelings that I was like, and the reason was because I was just doing stuff in my room, and 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 I was having a sip, and I was nosing it, and I was coming back to it after 2 minutes, and I found something completely different, and then it happened again. I came back to it, and I was like, and this was like literally me in my room on my own, having a sip, and I was like, oh my god, you know, like what's this, and it's kind of like endless of different aromas profile. um but yeah, all right, let's 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 try the last of the wines. What do we have here, Scott?
Se llama Pheno Perdido. So this is from a Herezano producer called Sanchez Romate, who have significant holdings in Pago Anyena that we were just talking about before. But this is Pheno Perdido, the lost Pheno. You hear this story a lot in Spain. Oh, you know, one day somebody tore down a wall in the bodega and we found 10 old barrels that nobody had heard about for 20 years or whatever. It's usually horseshit. This is, so the story is, you know, a lost old bodega, some old barrels. It's actually a blend selection that they very carefully put together to demonstrate two things. Firstly, it's just an overaged Pheno. So it's about 10 years of barrel age, and it's got this wattle bread character, I guess, overlaid on the characters that you expect to be a Pheno, but there's nothing particularly brassy or oxidized that suggests an Amontillado. So it's sort of like just on the point of still being a primary Pheno, but with lots and lots of you know, developed secondary character wafting around in it. It's a wine that Ramate have put together to demonstrate the lost Pheno. So the Pheno Perdido is what Phenos. So this is put together deliberately in the bodega now to show what Phenos up until the mid-1960s would always have been like before the advent of stainless steel, chill filtration, all the tech that we use nowadays to make gorgeous water white Phenos like La Goya that we started out. So we're just doing a loop around the paddock really in this tasting. And we end up with a wine that says, here's a very lightly filtered or en rama, off the branch, or as if it was straight out of the barrel kind of character, with a much deeper, you know, sort of green plum going into some, you know, very slightly orange and brown colors, and all of those flavors following through on the mouth. And it just suggests what Phenos in the first half of the 20th century would have been like. More oxidative influence and less filtration, and just another different version of the same thing. One of the other things that we've seen happen a fair bit in the last 10 years in El Marco is the small but important re-emergence of bottling phenos and Rama, or notionally unfiltered, but in reality usually very, very lightly filtered. And Rama phenos are kind of a really great midpoint between commercial phenos that are filtered and water white that we're all familiar with, and the vineyard specific palominos. The more you filter anything, the more you take the earth out. So unfiltered or very lightly filtered phenos in Rama are much less about the primacy of the chamomile-like smell of the floor yeast or Vegemite inland, and they're much more earthy and rich and tasting of the pago and the earth. So first thing with
it's crazy. It's
and
crazy.
Rama, they're a little bit. They are usually a lot more expensive. This one's stupid cheap. It's about $40 retail for a 750 ml bottle of 10-year-old very lightly filtered pheno.
Which is a gift from God to a sommelier. This is it's a quite of a interesting. It's quite crazy. A wine. What do we know about the producer, Scott? Who's
Sanchez de Ramate are a very old, in classical sherry terms, probably almost small, medium, maybe Jerez's answer to Yalumba or something like that, or Chateau Tabilca, sort of a medium-sized family firm with a long history. They actually, for a Jerezano producer, they're interesting in that they work very, very little with pheno. They're actually specialists in Amontillado and brandy in particular, and they have a very small profile as producers of phenos in Jerez. So this is not their regular wine. It's a little more or less Almacenista project, which is a term we probably don't need to get into, but just a little side project making a thing.
Yeah.
But it's not their house pheno, and they're not very well known as pheno producers, but they're very, very great Amontillado and brandy producers.
Raul, you did pick all of these wines. Actually, you were choosing these wines, and you definitely know them very well. What is this wine? Can you please explain it to me, because I still didn't understand. What's this? Is this a fino? Is this an amontillado? It's an amontillado fino.
I'm going to confuse everything more. Obviously, the first thing we need to do is look at the difference of color in between the two wines. So it is a bit darker, and it's more clear than the other one, okay? Which it says a lot about La Goya as well, because obviously, even though that the filtered wines in La Goya, the one is a bit cloudy because somehow they don't do protein stabilization. They make the ones more natural. But Scott make a very good point. Like wines, pale wines, they go under flow. There is a point where the flow start to die off and they start to oxidize and go towards the direction of an amontillado. But this is not an amontillado. So we're used to different types of sherry, but as Scott knows, if you go back to 20 years ago, you could have, with different names for different reasons, more than 15 to 20 different kinds of pheno styles. To me, that I have the chance to try a lot of different wines of this style, it falls into the category of what the locals would call a Pheno mantecoso. So mantecoso relates to butter because it is
like a battery Pheno.
Battery Pheno. And a Pheno mantecoso becomes the point where you have a Pheno solera, which start to reach the sort of 10 years of age. And the floor is still protecting the wine, but that floor yeast that floats and sits on the surface, some of it, because of the lack of nutrients, start to die, precipitates on the bottom of the barrel and create a layer of lees. So somehow
at the bottom of the barrel. But the floor yeast, the layer of yeast is still there?
Yeah.
Or it's just thinner? Or
it's a bit thinner, but it's not oxidating the wine like an
Amontillado.
It's not broken, but some of those lees, floor yeast, start to precipitate, go to the bottom, and there is a natural process of almost batonnage, not force. So the creamy and buttery flavors that you might get on a wine from Burgundy, which has been stirred on the lees and things like that, happen naturally here. But the flavor profile is very different. And you have this sexy, gorgeous, buttery character into this wine, which reinforces the texture. Somehow, if you see, the alcohol of this wine is 15% too, but there is a better alcohol integration due to that extra textural benefit of this wine due to that precipitation of yeast. So it does have a bit more color. It's very bright, and it's very bright because wines that sits on lees and oak for a fair period of time, they don't need to be protein and stabilized. The wine's got an amazing texture. Again, it's another one which is seedless. It is the persistence is even longer than Mercedes. But to me, this wine is salinity and butter. That's what brings to my mind. And obviously, almonds.
Almonds, like toasted, no? Like well roasted almonds, huh?
This wine is asking for anything that is nutty. It tastes a lot like sunflower seeds. It's asking for an ajo blanco gazpacho with almonds. It's asking for a romesco sauce. It's asking for a satay, like an Indian satay. This is one thing. This style of wine, like this Pheno Perdido, they're amazing with Indian food. Even very spicy Indian food. They work really well with the spiciness. These barrels, the pretty old barrels, during the caramelization of sugars on the cellulose of the barrel, on very old barrels, there is chemical compound called sotolon is created. It's a pure fenugreek of curry spice. There is a lot of sotolon on this barrel. You can find all Madeira, all Marsala, all fortified wines. The link of connection with Indian food is amazing. They reduce the heat of chili. They work very well with the curry flavors. They work really well with the nutty flavors. Makes this wine super, super, super versatile. When I'll go, for example, talking about the spicy food, I'll think of La Goya much more to go with Thai food. For Indian food, this Pheno would be sensational. And I love, like during my time in Melbourne, I've been living in Melbourne for 18 years. The 18 years, there is nothing I love the most than go to Victoria Street or to go to somewhere in Chinatown, go to Linan, Saperim, go to Dentist Sichuan, and had some very spicy Chinese Sichuan food with a bottle of Pheno Manzanilla. And this Pheno Perdido will touch all the boxes for it.
It's a real
La Callejuela as well, of course.
Well, so then for me, in between those things that you've been talking about, this is what you do with Sri Lankan fish curry.
Sri Lankan fish curry,
which is great. A bit more aromatic, more lemongrassy.
I loved Raul's descriptions the most tonight. Just talking about what's really going on in and under that wine, and the caramelization of things hanging around the barrel for a long time. It's really important, I think, to understand that the floor yeast works in two different ways. So there's the quite delicate, pretty floral dried chamomile character on the nose and on the surface of the wine, reflecting where the floor lives on the surface of the barrel. That's, you know, that is the smell of floor yeast. But there's a second version, the deeper spent floor yeast term, Raul, locally cabezuelas. Quite often there's a, so coming after that buttery character, there's this butter to bitter transition in the back palate on wines that are aged more, and that's the spent taste of floor yeast in the bottom of the barrel. So it's live and perfumed and just, you know, dryly floral on the top of the barrel, and sometimes that's how the floor presents. And sometimes it's a more post-butter bitter character of spent yeast in the bottom of the barrel, and there's two quite different gastronomic expressions that the floor can have in wine, depending on, you know, what wine it is and how it's aged and how long for and all that sort of thing.
At the end, it's just adding complexity to the wine, and that's why we are tasting right now one of the most complex wines in the world.
I think I didn't mention about this Pheno Perdido. Scott touched before about the Burgundy legend Bon Coche Dury, and there is a line of producers in Burgundy like Coche Dury, like Ramonet, like Le Fleuve, that make their wines on a really reductive manner, and to keep it simple, with a lack of oxygen. That sort of using a specific type of oak with a very tight grain that breathes very slowly. The ones have this sort of sulfide sort of it's almost like a nutty sulfury reduction character, which is very sexy.
Mm-hmm.
In some Phenos, when you have a very healthy sort of floor yeast, there is a natural reduction, which the floor doesn't allow any oxygen to get into the wine. So the wine closes itself and protect itself from oxidation through the reduction. And obviously, because the one is fortified, this one has got a beautiful, sexy, sulfide, garlicky, leaky sort of tone. It's not cabbage. This is a sort of roasted shallot, garlicky, leek reduction that you find in Burgundy, that you can find in some Phenos, in just a handful of, not many, but here is super sexy. I think it's on the nose is so engaging, the sort of reductive sort of tone. Yes, wow. You know, for any wine lover, any Burgundy drinker who love this.
Yeah, I think this is like why, as well as I mentioned before, that this is why sherry is coming back so hard now, and it's trendy again, because sommeliers love it. Because sommeliers are looking for something different all the time, and they are looking for Jura, and they're looking for sherry, and they're looking for places that are very unique. And yeah, sherry definitely is unique in its style. All right, guys. So this has been what we expected, talking to two legends about sherry, two legends from the wine industry that they really know what they're talking about the new wave of winemakers that are producing wine in the south of Spain, tasting wine from this new wave of winemakers, but also the last previous generations of winemakers that have been producing wines more in the traditional way, talking about the piece of the land, the geographical points, talking about the grape varieties, about the soil types. It has been a bit nerdy at some point, but you guys are talking to experts, really, but this has been a real pleasure for me. From the 8 Spanish organizations, I just wanted to thank everyone that's watching. I wanted to thank Raul, that has been always supporting the organization, that has been sharing his knowledge here today with us. I wanted to thank Scott, that has been one of the sponsors, not only for these wines that we're tasting right now, but another wines that have been provided from him very kindly, very gently, for another videos that we have recorded for this online festival. Thank you, guys.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.
Gracias a ti.
It has been a real pleasure, and this is a document that will last forever, and I'm sure that people will enjoy it. Thanks for your time, thanks for your interest, and thanks for sharing your knowledge. It has been a real honor.
Thank you to you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you, guys. Salud.
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 Cheers, guys.